Now, the foot, this is the skeleton of the foot. This is the skeleton of the foot. And when you look at the medial aspect of the foot is arched. This arch is what we call the medial longitudinal arch. It is known as the medial longitudinal arch. And laterally, it is also arched, and this is what we call the lateral longitudinal arch. And then even transversely, it is arched, and this is what we call the transverse arch. So the foot is arched so that because the ground on which you step is irregular. God created the foot not in relation to the shoes you're going to wear, but because the ground was irregular. And this arched foot makes you stable on the ground. So the medial longitudinal arch is made up of this bone known as the calcaneum. The medial longitudinal arch is made up of this bone known as the calcaneum. It is made up of this bone known as the talus. This is the talus. Then this bone known as the navicular. And then here we have three bones known as cuneiform bones. This is the medial cuneiform bone, the intermediate cuneiform bone, and we have a lateral cuneiform bone. Then it is made up of these bones, the first, the second, and the third metatarsals. So the bones which make the medial longitudinal arch, we have the calcaneum, the talus, the navicular, the three cuneiform bones, the medial, the intermediate, and the lateral, and then metatarsals 1, 2, and 3. Those bones form the medial longitudinal arch, and it is higher than the lateral longitudinal arch. Then the lateral longitudinal arch is made up of these bones, the calcaneum, the talus, meaning that this talus forms both the lateral and the medial. The calcaneum also forms the lateral and the medial. So the lateral longitudinal arch is also formed by this bone, the calcaneum, the talus, the cuboid bone, and metatarsals 4 and 5. These bones are the ones which form the lateral longitudinal arch. But as you see, the medial longitudinal arch is more raised than the lateral longitudinal arch. And the medial longitudinal arch has more bones than the lateral longitudinal arch. When you count them, the calcaneum is number 1, the talus is number 2, the navicular is number 3, the 3 cuneiform bones form 6, and then the 3 metatarsals 1, 2, and 3 form 9, made up of 9 bones. Whereas the lateral longitudinal arch is made up of the calcaneum, which is 1, the talus, which is 2, the cuboid, which is 3, and then the 2 metatarsals 4 and 5, which is 5 bones. So the medial longitudinal arch is made up of 9 bones, and that is made up of 5 bones. Then we have this transverse arch. The transverse arch is made up of the cuboid bone and the 3 cuneiform bones. The cuneiform bones have the lateral, the intermediate, and the medial. So the cuboid bone, the lateral cuneiform, the intermediate cuneiform, and the medial cuneiform, then the bases of the metatarsals. These are the bases of the metatarsals. Let's see. The bases of the metatarsals forming the transverse arch. So the 3 arches of the foot are the medial longitudinal arch, the lateral longitudinal arch, and the transverse arch. The transverse arch is made up of the cuboid, the 3 cuneiform bones, and the bases of the metatarsal bones. And these arches are compatible with the irregular ground on which we stand, and therefore they stabilize us when we are standing. There are many factors which cause these arches not to collapse, because if you walk for longer distances, the arches are going to collapse and you're going to have a flat foot because of the collapse of the arches. And what is causing the collapse of the arches? What is causing the collapse of the arches is the weight which has been standing on those arches for a longer distance. And then when those arches collapse, you sense pain within the foot. But what factors lead to the stability of these arches such that they do not collapse? You have ligaments which are joining these bones. These ligaments are making sure that the bones are held tightly so that they do not dislocate. So those are intertarsal ligaments, that the ligaments between the tarsal bones fix those bones together that they do not collapse, and that is one of the factors which causes the stability of the arches. Then we have been seeing the tendons which insert on the foot. These tendons which insert in the foot, when these muscles contract, the tendons pull upwardly. The tendons pull upwardly, and when the tendons pull upwardly, they raise the arches so that the arches remain suspended. Then the bones themselves are wedge-shaped. These bones are wedge-shaped. When I say that the bones are wedge-shaped, they are like these interlocking bricks. They fit into each other. So these bones are wedge-shaped, so they fit into each other, and that wedge shape is one of the factors which stabilizes those arches. And then you have long plantar ligaments. Ligaments, there's a fibrous dense connective tissue on the inferior surface of the foot, on the sole of the foot, known as the plantar aponeurosis. The plantar aponeurosis is attached at the calcaneum and then at the heads of the metatarsals. It stretches from the calcaneum to the heads of the metatarsals. In other words, it keeps the two ends of the arches in position. The plantar aponeurosis keeps the two ends of the arches in position because it is attached at the calcaneum and at the heads of the metatarsals, keeping those two ends of the arch in position so that they do not slide away, so that you get a flat foot. The joints of the medial longitudinal arch will have this joint, the subtalar joint. They call it a subtalar joint because it is below the talus. And this is the joint between the talus and the calcaneum. It is known as a subtalar joint. Club foot always affects the subtalar joint. Then you have the talo-navicular joint between the talus and the navicular. Then you have the navicular cuneiform joint between the navicular bone and the cuneiform bones. Then you have the metatarsal cuneiform joints between the metatarsals and the cuneiform bones. And the joints of the lateral longitudinal arch will have the subtalar joint still, the calcaneocuboidal joint between the calcaneum and the cuboid. Then we have this joint between the cuboid and the cuneiform bone, and then we have another joint between the cuneiform bone and the metatarsal joint, metatarsal cuneiform joints. I want you to go and read about these arches again, the bones which contribute to those arches, the joints within each of the arches of the foot, and the factors which lead to their stability.